and welcome back to another video. Now clearly today I'm outside, I'm not in the workshop, and that's because I'm doing my YouTube cross-channel challenge 2021 for the month of April. Now the brief was essentially to go out into nature and find something to turn, and you have 24 hours from collecting the material to making the end product. So I had a long think, and I'll put some sketches over the screen now of what I had to think about. And I've decided I'm going to make a mallet. Now I think a mallet would be a really fun project to do, probably a little bit challenging to make out of a log, but I think it would definitely show beginner turners like myself that you can make things from logs very easily. You just need to know how to do it. So I'm going to have a look through all of these logs, and there's quite a few logs about here, and I'm going to pick something that I think will work well to make a mallet. So I want something dense and hard and heavy to make the mallet head from, so something like oak is quite a good choice for this. And then for the mallet body, or the handle should I say, I want something like a piece of ash. Now ash is quite good at that because it absorbs a lot of the shocks and vibrations from a mallet. And then for the head, as I said, you want something dense and heavy, like a piece of oak. And by the looks of this, there is a piece of oak here, so we're going to try and get that one out. Now obviously I didn't bring a saw because I'm not going to walk around with a saw, so we're just going to have to do our best to get this out of here and take it back home. So I found my two pieces of timber. I've got this piece, which I have no idea what it is. I found it right outside, the bit outside our house. I don't really know what it is. It's quite old and it appears to have been sitting around for a few years. Maybe some form of a fruit tree. It looks similar to our apple trees, so perhaps it's apple or something like that. Whatever it is, it seems like it'd be pretty nice. I'll saw it up there and see what it is inside. And then we've got this humongous log here. Now I have just noticed a major flaw with this log. The fact that there is this crack running the whole way through it. But luckily I only need a small section to make a mallet head out of, and there is no crack running through this bit here. So I can do a little section out of this. But this and this will make a mallet. This is too thick really. Ideally I would want something about a third of this diameter, maybe 2/3, but it'll be fine. It'll be good enough. And yes, I did just drop the log. It'll probably be alright. I'll just have to turn away quite a lot of the material, which is a little bit of wastage, but at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. Annoyingly, this log is about 25 times, 30 times the size I actually need, so what I'll do is I'll chop out this section and then I'll put the rest of it back. I'm now wondering if this is maybe sycamore or pine. It smells quite wet still, and it is still got quite a lot of dampness to it, which is sort of to be expected. But I think in terms of a good start, that'll be a nice mallet head. Obviously it will only be about that much of the timber, but I want to leave myself enough that I can put the centres in quite far. Loving this new expensive sawhorse I've got here, otherwise known as a piece of log. Works quite well actually. So I'm just going to cut the end of this off just so I can work out what the timber is. Yeah, I believe that could be a piece of plum maybe, or apple. Looks like it's definitely from a fruit tree. I think that'd be really, really nice for a handle. Got some lovely patterns here, and I think that'll be perfect. So I'm going to saw this up. I don't know quite how big, but my lathe can only do fairly small things anyway, so I'll cut up a piece and we'll get going on the lathe. So I ended up changing the piece of timber. This one was my original piece, and if you look carefully you can see there's a little crack runs along here, so I thought maybe not use that. Got a different piece, no cracks in this piece, which is better. There is a little mark there, but that's just the saw, that's fine. So that should be a nice bit to make the head out of. And then we've got this gorgeous bit of apple, I believe, which would be really nice to make the hammer's mallet's handle from. Trying to say, I couldn't work out what I was trying to say there. I'm really happy with these though, and I might make some more stuff out of these. I don't know yet, but I'll leave them out here for now. It's rather warm out here, so I'm going to get going in the workshop. So the main tools I'm going to be using for this project are the parting tool, the skew, spindle gouge and the spindle roughing gouge. I may occasionally use a round scraper should I need it, however most of the work will be done with the roughing gouge, which will allow me to rough all of the material out. Then I can move on to using the parting tool to get my tenons turned, then the skew to provide a clean cut, and then the spindle gouge just to round over the bottom of the mallet handle. So they're the main tools we're going to be using for this, although you could of course use other tools, but that's what I want to use for this project. I started by mounting a blank between centres, and then used my spindle roughing gouge to remove as much of the bark as possible. This then allowed me to see what the timber was like underneath and check for any defects. After this, I then moved on to profiling in the shape. To do this, I used my spindle roughing gouge again, and a little bit of the skew to provide a clean cut. On the base of the handle, I used my spindle gouge, and that just allowed me to really get the bevel rubbing and achieve a nice finish. I then sanded up from 120 grit through to 400 grit, and then added one final coat of 1500 grit before applying cellulose sanding sealer, cutting back once with 1500 grit, and then applying wood turners blend over the top of that. Now I really like doing 1500 grit, as I feel it adds another level to the finish, and it really does make it much smoother. I should have said earlier, but I turned a 30mm long tenon on this piece. This ended up being a tiny bit too short. I should have done it about 35mm, but it's not the end of the world, as I made sure the tenon was slightly oversized to ensure that it had a really strong bond in the mallet's head. So this was the original piece of sycamore that I cut up. However, upon leaving it outside for about 2 or 3 hours, it automatically started developing these cracks. And that's because this was a fairly wet piece of timber. So unfortunately I had to pick another piece of timber. Luckily I had got some other bits of green timber which weren't quite as wet, which had been sitting around for about 4 or 5 months in the workshop, so it still fits the brief, as I'm still reusing something that isn't a dedicated piece of turning wood, such as a spindle blank or a bowl blank. So it's still the same piece of wood basically. It's a piece of sycamore, it was cut from the same forest, it's just been sitting around for a few months, so it's had a chance to dry. But I thought I should let you guys know in case you're wondering why I didn't end up using this piece. However, I did still do all of the turning in 24 hours. I then mounted the second piece of timber between a centre and a faceplate. Now this was because this piece of timber needed to be drilled into, and it was also very, very off-centred, so I wanted to ensure it wasn't going to fly off the lathe at me. So I used my spindle roughing gouge to get the piece round, and then I used a drill in order to create the tenon and mortise section. So I was creating the mortise using a 20mm drill bit. Now ideally don't use a spade bit, but this is all I had, and I would rather have used a Forstner bit, as it would provide a cleaner cut and it would be a lot more rigid in the cut, because the risk of using a spade bit like this is it could snap or it could fly out of the timber. So ideally don't use a spade bit when hollowing out something using a drill chuck. But it was fine, it worked, I just don't recommend it. Now unfortunately I drilled the mortise slightly too deep in this piece, and it didn't occur to me at the time that I could have just used the parting tool to remove that excess material so that the mortise and tenon glued up well. This wasn't the end of the world for this project, as the tenon was already slightly oversized in its diameter, but annoyingly I didn't get the two pieces of timber to seat together quite as well as they could have. The reason I'm saying this to you guys is so that if you end up making a mallet, you ensure you check that the tenon and the mortise are the same length, so that it all sits together nicely. That's if you're doing a hidden mortise and tenon like I am. Ideally you should use an epoxy to glue this together, however I just used some wood glue as it wasn't really going to be used for anything particularly strenuous. I hope you guys enjoyed following along with this project. I'll put some photos over the top now so you can see how it all turned out after glue up. But I'm pretty happy with the overall outcome. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed seeing how I made this mallet. I really did enjoy doing this project, and I'm definitely going to be doing lots more with logs, especially with the apple wood. I loved turning this apple, and it has a beautiful grain pattern to it. And I've got lots of sycamore as well, so if you've got any project ideas using logs that you're interested in seeing, let me know. I have got one idea to use a bit of a burr and encase it in resin and turn something out of that. Thank you for watching, I'll see you on the next video.